governance. We want the TM school graduates to be amongst the best. Thank you.
I don't think there's any other question I can delegate. There is an organization, intergovernmental organization called the South Center. It's basically a think tank to help the countries of the South, particularly as they negotiate with the countries of the North on a whole range of issues, any issue, health, education, whatever. So the South Center was established some time back, led by the late Julius Nyerere. It's headquartered in Geneva, and the reason for that is because a lot of the United Nations negotiations take place in Geneva. So it has to be there to be able to support the countries of the South as they engage in those negotiations. Now, it so happens that I'm the chair of the board of the South Center, which is meeting I hope I've got the dates right, in Geneva. And I suspect that on the 29th, I'll be in Geneva for that. So you might not see me at the sword turning. That's not because I don't support the project. Tsepo asked a question at the other Tsepo, question about crime. Very, very correct, very important issue. And I really wish, Tsepo, that you could have continued to indicate what you think we should do about this question of crime. Because it is not an easy question and needs a lot of thinking. Vice Chancellor, I remember there was an occasion here, we were celebrating the 150th anniversary of the university. And sitting somewhere here was General Libya, the head of the Hawks. And I said to him, I was very glad to see him. And fortunately, we had lunch together, sitting next to each other after that. And I told him that the reason I was glad to see him is because I wanted to ask him exactly the same question. And I said, General, what do we do about these intolerably high levels of crime? And he agreed. He agreed that he was ready to come whenever I asked him to give me his own answer to that question. It's a very serious issue. I think all of us would agree. But it's very difficult to answer the question, what is to be done? I'm currently reading a book which deals with trade in narcotics. And I'm learning a great deal about this. That South Africa is linked to many countries which have got this problem of drugs. Brazil, Bolivia, Belgium, all sorts of places. And there are huge volumes of drugs that come through this country. Cocaine from Latin America, heroin from the East, Afghanistan and those places, Pakistan. And clearly I'm learning a lot about this matter about drug dealing on that global scale. But despite that, if you ask me now, well, what do we do about it? I wouldn't know how to answer that question. it's one of these issues that I think requires a lot of thinking. And part of the challenge with it is that there is too much of the blame by the population that points fingers at the South African Police Service. So this is the principal instrument that as a country we have to combat crime. But if the people are correct in saying that a lot of the problem arises from the fact that this instrument of ours is ineffective, that in fact many of them, well, let me say some, of the police officers are themselves involved in crime, then I'm saying again, it becomes very difficult to answer the question, what is to be done? I've heard people say that, why doesn't the Minister of Police allow the National Commissioner to comment on these crimes? He's the first one everywhere. If they steal my boots, he'll be the first one there. Why? I'm saying people raise those questions. I was saying to General Libya that many years ago we discussed policing. This is before '94. And one of the things that we said was that we don't like the SAP, that institution, South African Police, of the apartheid system. But we are going to need policing. So what are we going to do? Excuse me. So one of the things we decided was that we must redefine the task of the police. The task of the police under the apartheid system largely had been to arrest people, knock them on the head, lock them up and all. It was an enemy force against the people, certainly the black oppressed. Now we wanted a police service which would be a friend of the people, not an enemy of the people. So we said the first thing to do, whereas the apartheid system taught about law and order, let's talk about safety and security, the safety and security of the population. And that would be the task of the police. And secondly, that we must take away from the police these military ranks, these generals and colonels and brigadiers. And these categories are categories that belong to the army. We don't want a police service that is military. So that's why we removed all of these ranks. And that's why even in the Constitution, the National Commissioner of Police is the National Commissioner of Police. It's still called National Commissioner to this day. No generals there. And then one day, Comrade Jason Zuma addressed a meeting in Soweto and said these ranks, commissioner and superintendent and so on, these are not, the police are faced with criminals. And the criminals must shake in their boots when they see a police officer. And they'll shake if it's a general, not if it's a national commissioner. So that's how the ranks changed to what they are now. And I'm fighting that they must go back to where they were. The police must be civilian police, not military police. That's part of the answer to the question, what do we do with crime? So what I can say with regard to this is that, in fact, There are a number of us who are meeting to discuss exactly this question: what do we do with regard to this crime? Because the answer is not easy, but something must be done. And I would like SEP to come and join us and contribute some ideas to that question. So some work is going on, has to go on, because we have got to deal with this matter. With regard to the elections in Nigeria, I went there as an observer. So it was not to say anything at all to the Nigerians about these elections, but just to observe. So we observed and then gave a report. And left it with the Nigerians, and I don't know what they're going to do with it. But of course, as you interact with the people, you never mind you're an observer. You do interact and discuss with them as to what is to be done, even about Nigeria. It was very, very important, it being Nigeria. The issues of peace are very important. At all costs, to avoid all violence. That's one of the advice we would always give to our Nigerian colleagues. And also to deal with one another, not as enemies. Whoever wins is going to have to govern Nigeria. And whoever loses has got to be part of Nigeria to look at what this governor is doing. So this can't be enemies, to avoid a situation where you have that kind of tension. I don't know what I would say to the South Africans. Clearly, one of the things that is critically important, which has been legitimately raised, is the youth vote. This is a very serious matter because it's clear that among this large number of people who don't vote, a large number of them are the youth. That's a serious problem. If these young people who tomorrow are going to be my leaders, they are letting the country drift whichever way the country wants to go without making an input themselves as young people to say, we don't want this South Africa here, we want it there. It's a political problem. The youth organizations that come from the youth, my view is like that they've become very weak. And therefore not making an impact on the youth. To say to the youth, the future of this country is your responsibility. And you can't delegate that responsibility to anybody. And one of your responsibilities in that context is to vote. But one of the responsibilities in that context is to have a view. If I come to say to the young people, please vote for me, they must ask me the question, why? If I say no because I'm handsome, they said no. We want something much more substantial in order to be able to vote for you. And for an organization like the ANC, to ask the question, ask the ANC, given what has happened over all of these years, what is it that justifies your request that I vote for you? when there are also so many negatives. I'm saying that the youth need to be raising those questions and therefore participating in voting, because that's part of the process of determining the future of South Africa. I'm going to come back to this question just now. But the youth, I'm saying the youth, political youth organizations, the African National Congress Youth League, it's been absent for so many years. And yet it was its task, part of its task, to engage the youth, to make sure that the youth are political actors in terms of determining the future of the country. But it has not been there to play that role. It's back now, and I do hope that it will focus on that issue. And that should help in terms of raising the numbers of young people who register to vote and vote. And that's one of the matters that is very important here in this country. There was a question raised about the construction mafia. And I think obviously this is one of those matters that relate to crime. Because you can't have these people who hang around and be demanding these subcontracts. I think this one is a law enforcement matter, because I think this is just pure criminality. And hopefully it would be dealt with in that context. There's a question that was raised about AGOA and others. I didn't quite understand. Could the question be posed again? Just one minute. Incidentally, when people speak, they shouldn't speak to them like that. Because I can't understand what they're saying. So a little bit of distance between the mouth and the mic.
I think, Mr. President, as I was asking the question, I saw that you were in a deep conversation with Prof.
I was asking what you were saying.
Okay. I submit, Mr. President. What I was asking, Mr. President, is that the relationship that the ANC or the government has with the Democrats, how will that impact us in terms of remaining in the AGOA? Or will we get kicked out because of the changing dynamics in the political sphere?
Okay. Well, fortunately, the meeting that was scheduled, I think for November, to discuss the AGOA thing with the Americans, will still take place here, though there was pressure that it must be moved elsewhere. Fortunately, it still take place here. And I mean, if I was in that meeting, this is what I would say to the Americans. That it was very, very correct indeed for the Americans to decide on AGOA in support of the African countries in terms of their development. That challenge hasn't changed. The need to access those US markets without duties in order to help our continent to develop. That challenge hasn't changed. Even for a country like South Africa, our access to the US markets is important for our economy, and therefore even the people who get employed as a result. That challenge remains. Now, it's obvious, since 1994, we have differed with the US governments on many things. For instance, one outstanding example is when the Americans wanted to go and attack Iraq in 2003. We said no. We objected to that, and we gave them all sorts of material to show them that there was no such thing as weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It didn't exist. We disagreed, they went to war. We disagree about many other things. Now, you can't base a relationship like the AGOA relationship, which has long-term implications. You can't base it on the fact that we must not quarrel about or differ about something. I mean, if there's a condition like that, no, we must not differ on anything, then let's get out of AGOA. I have a suspicion that there is sufficient maturity among the US government not to insist that there should be any change on this AGOA matter. If I'm wrong, you raise it with me next time. But my suspicion is that they understand that continuing imperative to impact positively on these major challenges of development, job creation, and so on. And that they can't walk away from that responsibility as it relates to South Africa simply because we're differing about Ukraine. There's our colleague from the Northern Cape who talked about people being sidelined since 2007, and that includes me. It's a very serious question. I'll broaden it a bit. The current CEO of the South African Institute of Race Relations made a speech not long ago in the US. It's a very interesting speech, and which I think everybody should read. And he says, one of the things he says, that in order to understand South Africa today, you got to look at it in terms of its different ages, what he calls ages. And he says age number one is a period from 1994 to 2007. That's age number one. Then he says from 2008 up to 2022 is age number two. And then after that comes age number three. And he describes these ages. And he says age number one, 94 to 2007, was a very positive period in our country. He produces many figures. He says, look at this, look at the rate of growth. Numbers of people who are employed grow from 8 million to 14 million during this period. He says here all of these positives. This is the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations. And then 2008, everything goes down. Factually, I don't think any one of us can challenge him. Because practically, that's what happened. Practically, that's the truth. He does not ask the question, what happened? Because the people who were in government in 94 and 2007, in terms of party, were the same people who were in government in 2008 and 2022. Why do they behave differently From 94 to 2000, and everything is very positive. From 28, I'm saying the same party. Why? He doesn't pose that question. In order to really to get into a fundamental understanding, what is it that changed? Because something changed. Questions that are being raised about what do we do about levels of crime, about young people who are not voting. I don't know if our colleague from the Northern Cape has an answer to that question. What happened to change the... in my view is this, colleagues, that fortunately we're at UNISA here, we're at the university, and Vice-Chancellor spoke about the tasks of a university. I think we need a lot of thinking, a lot of research. Because these negative things which the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations talks about from 2008 downwards, they are not accidental. Somebody decided that it must happen like that. Look at absolutely everything. We are very fortunate, for instance, that we had the Nugent Commission of Inquiry into SARS. You remember the problem with SARS? The problem with the Revenue Service was that for many years it was outperforming itself. During this period to 1994 to 2007, it's really outperforming itself. And then at a later stage, it started underperforming itself. And so the question arose, what has gone wrong? That's how the commission chaired by Judge Nugent was appointed. I don't know if I ask people here to raise their hands, how many people have read that commission report? I wouldn't be surprised if I don't see any hand. It's available there, it's in the public domain, it's in the internet. And what the Nugent Commission says is that this was a deliberate decision to destroy the Revenue Service. It was prepared for. There's this fellow who was appointed as head of the SARS, Tom Moyane. Tom Moyane was prepared from 2013. Tom Moyane was appointed head of SARS in 2014. But from 2013, he was being trained by this American company, Bain, to take over as head of SARS. When Bain appeared before the Nugent Commission, and they said to them, you started working with Mr. Moyane on SARS in 2013. How did you know he was going to be appointed head of SARS in 2014? And the answer from Bain was, no, we were told that he has a personal ambition to be head of SARS. And so we decided to help him. They trained him and prepared him to destroy SARS. The Sunday Times, for a whole year, carried articles about so many bad people in the leadership of SARS. Very bad. When Moyane came in, one of the first things he did was to sack all of these people identified by Sunday Times as bad. After which the Sunday Times apologized that we were very wrong to point to those people as bad. And now, colleagues, you know that SARS is responsible for 95, 98% of state revenues. You destroy SARS, you destroy this democratic republic. The Nigerian Commission details what happened to destroy SARS. This is one of the things that happened in this period identified by the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations of this this decline. It was very deliberate, very conscious. Some people decided that. I'm saying it's a very specific example with all of the details to substantiate the point I'm trying to make, that this negative decline, which the Institute of Relations is talking about, was not accidental. The notion is put about that, no, this was because there were greedy people and there were corrupt people. Yes, indeed, there were greedy people and corrupt people. But there were also other people with a political objective, which was to destroy the democratic revolution. And those of us who are old enough will remember that the first time we had a national shutdown, load shedding, national, was in January 2008. Professor Nzovu, you remember that? It was January 2008, load shedding, national. The mines closed down for a whole week. Serious crisis. And the argument was that the reason for that was because ESCOM had told the government in 1998 that there must be investment in new infrastructure. And the government didn't listen. New infrastructure for generation. Government didn't listen. Hence the blackout in January 2008. That story was false. That story was cooked up. The reason there was a shutdown in January 2008 is because the people who were in charge of the power stations didn't do what they were supposed to do, which was to replenish coal, so that you got coal nearby to put into the power station. They didn't. The power stations ran out of coal, not because there was no coal in the country, but the people in ESCOM decided, let's shut it down. I'm saying, but the lie was told that, it's because the government didn't do this investment. It was not true. There is somebody who was an old friend of mine. I don't know if it still is. I think it still is. Into Brian Molife. Brian gets appointed to head ESCOM in 2014, April or thereabouts. And by August 2018, they had finished with the load shedding. Again, all of us who are old enough will remember that. Already then, that 2014, no more load shedding. 2015, no more load shedding. 2016, no load shedding. It comes back towards end of 2017. And all what they did, Brian and his colleagues, was to maintain the equipment properly. To maintain the equipment properly so that you don't have to have these shutdowns. Now, if you ask anybody, what did Brian and the others do in 2014, such that for so many years there was no load shedding? They'll find all manner of reasons. Instead of looking at this one, to maintain, to repair, to do whatever. And indeed, for so many years, there was no load shedding. He left. After a little while, it came back. So I say, it was very correct of Brian Molefe to say, I've been brought from there to here to deal with this matter of load shedding. Let's look at it seriously and act on it, which they did with positive results. So by the time this load shedding comes back in 2017, 2018, you must be able to guess why. It's because you got new people who don't behave in the way that Brian Molefe behaved. Why? I think it's deliberate. Seven years after Kusile started building the Kusile power station, 7 years after they started, there was not one, whatever you call it, of electricity that was coming from Kusile. After 7 years, nothing. What ESCOM did was to contract an Indian company to come and build Kusile. The company came and built Kusile Unit Number 1 in a much shorter period than was expected. And Kusile Power Unit Number 1, there it is, generating electricity. After 7 years, this Indian company was able to solve whatever the problem was. So it is not as though during the 7 years there were no ideas as to what is it to do in order to make sure that Unit 1 produces electricity. But the people were there, decided that they would not use that knowledge until the Indians were brought in. We used that knowledge, and in no time, Unit 1 was working. And then there's a strange thing that happens. So the Indians are expecting that their contract will be extended so that they do Unit 2 and Unit 3 and so on. No. ESCOM says to them, we will extend the contract on condition you get a PEE partner. So, what the Indians had done, they had brought something like 50 engineers and technicians from India to do this power station. So of course they say to ESCOM, we don't understand what you mean by this black economic empowerment. But for instance, if you have some black engineers to join ours, so maybe that. No, we don't have people like that. And they were training 150. As they were working on that Kusile thing and Mitupi, they were training 150 people. But because they couldn't agree on this PEE thing, they terminated the contract of the Indians. The Indians went home. Kusile is still not finished to this day. I'm saying it's deliberate. It's people who have wanted to produce this electricity crisis in the same way that they wanted to produce a revenue crisis by the destruction of SARS. You look at all of the state institutions. Look at Transnet. Look at what's happened to the police service. Look at the prosecution. All of these things going wrong systematically. Is it an accident? It's not. That is why I'm saying this question that was raised by your colleague from the Northern Cape is important. It was not only people being marginalized after 2007 ANC conference. There's a whole process that takes place in this country which still we don't understand, of a systematic process to ensure that the democratic republic doesn't succeed. That's one of the things I think it's necessary for us to understand, because it would then help us also to understand even the question that's raised about crime. None of these negative things that happen in this period identified by the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations, none of them are accidental. None of them are a result of greed. Sure, there is greed. Sure, there is corruption. But at the base of it all is to make sure that we fail. It's necessary to understand that. What is it that is wrong? In order to be able to find the right answers as to what is to be done. I must apologize for all of this long presentation, but I think it's a matter of strategic importance for the future of our country to understand what went wrong. I'm saying because there were deliberate processes put in place by some people to make sure that this democratic republic fails. That's a matter that we need to still discuss even with the ANC. I don't think the ANC understands that reality. It is true that you have got many greedy people, many corrupt people. If I ask the question, why is the ANC, which marginalized people as we are saying, why is it behaving like this? In 1997, Nelson Mandela says, addressing an ANC conference, that something wrong is happening, which is that as the ANC were attracting into our ranks people who are not ANC. People don't have these values of the ANC, but they can see that to be a member of the ANC is to have a step ladder to government in order to have the possibility to steal. So that's 1997, National Conference. That message has been repeated in all of the national conferences since then. But nothing has ever been done to get rid of these ones who entered into the ANC without carrying the value system. We beginning of 2020, we met 350 leaders of the ANC in Durban. We're talking about the ANC. So I make a presentation about the ANC, what the ANC is, what it stands for, and all that. And later, a young fellow stands up and says, "President, I do not know this ANC you are talking about, because I joined a faction of the ANC. The faction recruited me, identified itself as a faction. That's the ANC I know. The ANC I know is an ANC organized in factions. This one you're talking about, I have never heard of it." This was illustrating a point that the ANC had accumulated within its ranks wrong people. Wearing ANC t-shirts, they know how to toy and to sing and dance and all that. But they are not ANC. So the 2017 conference, national conference of the ANC decided the ANC must renew itself, otherwise it will die. That was in December 2017. Nothing happened in terms of that renewal process, nothing. The last conference in 2022 repeats that message. The ANC must renew itself. Nothing has happened so far. But the ANC must renew itself. I say to the ANC comrades that when you say I must go campaigning next year, to say to people, vote ANC. How am I going to do that? To say, vote ANC. When I know very well that the branch of the ANC in this constituency is led by a criminal. You can't. It's not possible to go and say, vote ANC for a criminal. The renewal process is important. But now, colleagues, I'm sorry to be talking ANC politics to you. The obvious challenge with regard to that renewal process is that as people talk about this ANC must renew itself because it had accumulated wrong sorts of people who are now doing wrong things, being greedy, corrupt, and all this. I look at myself and I say, it's going to catch me, this process. So what do? I must block it. I must make sure it doesn't happen. I'm answering our colleague from the Northern Cape to say, let's objectively look at the reality I was talking about. It's a much larger reality of, I was saying, a systematic process to destroy the democratic state all around. I'm talking about even the governing party, which has got people within itself who will resist its renewal and therefore perpetuate this reality that you've got people in the ANC who are greedy, who are thieves, who are corrupt. To perpetuate that, if you don't renovate, you don't renew the ANC, you will perpetuate that. That's the reality we've got to deal with. So the question remains, like on the crime issue, what is to be done? What do we do to defeat these people who systematically want to destroy this democratic state? Who are they? If Brian says to me, President, please put one on the here, I'll throttle him. I won't be able to produce that person. I think I've answered all the questions. Thanks.
Okay. We are going to do another round of questions, the last round of questions, and it's going to be a fight for space. I think each bloc must vote. I'll take one from this side, one in the middle. No commentary, please. So we're going to waste time with selecting sides. I'll take this gentleman with the white T-shirt here. I'll take the young man in red. I'll take you because you are shouting here. I want to take two ladies because the three are already. I'll take one there, but this section is already covered. Now, no, you're covered here. I'll take that lady there, number 5. One, white T-shirt. Number 2, my brother there. Number 3 here. Number 4 there. Number 5 there. In that order. Please remember, name, surname, your question, be brief because we have run out of time.
No, thank you very much. My name is Ivan Ramokhali. I'm the regional chairperson of Now in Tshwane. I'm also an MBA student at the University of Witwatersrand.
You are at the wrong university, but anyway, go ahead.
I have 2 questions directed to the President. And I think when the President was speaking, partly he did touch on it. The first one to the President would be, what should be the political orientation or the ideological orientation that can unite Africa? And in the articles that one read, one identified Pan-Africanism and socialism as 2 philosophies that can play a role in uniting Africa, particularly in the context of the New World Order brought by the new BRICS. The second question, which is also going to be short, President, it's about what is it that we must say to the United States of America to lessen their interference on the development of Africa, because we are also one of the formations that continue to go and picket at the embassies to really advocate for the cries of many Africans against what seems to be alleged as the US interfering on the affairs of Africa. And earlier on we were speaking about the issue of Iraq, because as a person that comes from this organization, we don't think talking to the USA through marches and protests, it's enough to actually make the USA aware that we are tired of America acting as a bully on the development of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Student Short. Number 2.
All right, thank you. My name is Tandole Tumokwin. Mr. President, can you please comment again on the chant of kill the Boer, kill the farmer? I watched your YouTube video during the process of TRC where you explained this matter. Why I'm asking, Mr. President, on the 29th of July, the president of the EFF led the celebration in FNB. Towards the end of that celebration, he celebrated a history by chanting "Kill the Boer and kill the farmer." Then there was an opposition to that. Some people even throw extreme words like white genocide. Can you please once again comment on that? And there was even an issue of relevance around that. Then lastly, a few years ago, Mr. President, I wake up on the headlines in the news, which said the state was captured, South Africa. I was with my older brother. I asked him, what do they mean when they say the state was captured? He said, maybe it's a coup d'etat. During the week, expect soldiers, stuff like that. But you see, there was a commission, a process to determine if indeed South Africa was captured. So, Mr. President, will you please comment around this state capture thing? What is your understanding? Can you educate a person like me who never understood what did they mean when they said South Africa was captured? Was South Africa really captured? Thank you.
Thank you. Number three. Number three is here. I'm sure you want the president to say what he said in the video. You want fresh material. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Saidi Zirumana, and I have just one question for the president, and the other one is an invitation that I'm going to ask. The first question is about peace and security in the Great Lake region. I remember in 2003, Mr. President, you were champion, or you were leading, mediating between the Sun City Agreement for the DRC government. And if I remember well, there was an agreement and you were part of it. And since then is almost 20 years. And the situation in the east of the DRC, or in the east part of the eastern part of the Africa, still in the same situation today, where before the agreement there was a part of the DRC which was occupied by rebel, and today is still the same way, where there's M23, and there's one side of the North Kivu, and there's also part of Ituri and the Great North. There's also ADF from Uganda, and so on. So I have a question for you regarding that, as you were there, and you know the dynamic of the situation there. What can you advise today the government and the people of the DRC? Is there anything that it was not implemented according to what that agreement was? And then the second question is...
It's the invitation, eh?
No, okay, that is an invitation. It's not a question. The invitation is the people of the DRC, especially the academia, youth. They want really to have time to spend with you and to analyze situation in the East, especially in the East. And that's the opportunity, if you can accord to them, they'll be much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Number 4, it's there. I allowed this background because it enriched the question. Thanks for not taking too much time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Please speak up a bit.
So thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sabina Mukojo. My question is, Mr. President, what's your view on the moonshot pact? Could it also be part of the systematic process planned to destroy the democratic revolution, or it can work for South Africa?
You are referring to the charter, the Moon Pact?
Yes.
Cool, thanks. The last question up there.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I wrote down my question. My name is Tana Makoka. In May of 2024...
Maybe bring the microphone. Yes.
Okay. In May of 2024, WHO members are set to discuss and agree to a binding treaty on pandemic preparedness. No one can deny the massive impact COVID-19 has had, particularly on developing countries.
We can't hear you. Maybe if it's written, can maybe Matuma read it for us?
It says in May 2024, WHO members are set to discuss and agree to a binding treaty on pandemic preparedness. No one can deny the massive impact COVID-19 has had, particularly on developing countries, and massively skewed access to vaccines and widely reported. Yet, comparing the latest version of the treaty to an earlier draft, important provisions have either been watered down or removed. Notably, references to transparency and information sharing, accountability of each member state equity, structural determinants of health system, strengthening skilled workforce, community engagement, and human rights. Next year, WHO meeting will be the culmination of an arduous 3 years process, a political and highly contested process. Mr. President, what advice would you give to representatives of the Global South who will be negotiating for a fairer deal for the developing world?
Thank you very much. Mr. President, the floor is yours. I know that the Vice Chancellor will also like to respond to one question she missed earlier, or not. No, we'll forget. Please forget what I said. We now request the President to come to the podium. And thank you very much for being a good audience. This is my last comment.
I must apologize. I won't be able to answer this last question about the WHO. It is true that it's a very complex negotiation that's taking place at the WHO about the health matters that she's raising, which also relate to intellectual property rights with regard to drugs and vaccines. I mentioned that we have a South Center whose board I'm the chairperson. The matter that you are raising is in fact on the agenda of the South Center because there are many elements. It's a very detailed question, this one. The agreements that the WHO needs to have impacting on health in the various instances that you've mentioned. So I'm saying that I apologize, really, I wouldn't be able to deal with that. It's a very detailed question. A lot of it requires doctors and people like that to look at the specifics in order to be able to construct this global agreement that is required. As an ongoing process, if I have your email, I could send you some of the material that's coming out of the South Center on these matters. The question that was raised about an African ideology. We said, I'm talking now as the ANC, we said we are fighting for the victory of the National Democratic Revolution. Now, I've seen a lot of discussion about this with some people like these ones who were at the moonshot pact, saying that this comes from Moscow, this NDR. It's some ideology which is, I don't know what. Colleagues, NDR stands for National Democratic Revolution. It arises in this context that many countries in Africa and elsewhere had to fight for liberation from colonial oppression, as a result of which they get national liberation. That's what the N stands for, nothing to do with Moscow. It's national liberation from colonial oppression. Here we're fighting from national liberation from apartheid oppression, which is colonial oppression. Then there's the D. The D stands for democratic. You could have you fight for a national liberation struggle. You succeed. You defeat the colonialists. So in that sense, the national liberation has been achieved. But here comes a Thabo Mbeki who's carrying a gun, impose himself on you as a dictator. So the D is missing. So people who are engaged in our kind of struggle said, we need national liberation to be replaced by a democratic system. And together these constitute a revolution. And that's absolutely all. National liberation, democracy. That's what NDR stands for. A lot of theorizing from these people about an importation from Moscow, and they cook up all sorts of things. And my view has been for many years that this is what should unite all of the countries on our continent. You look from the top to bottom, a realization of the objectives of a national democratic revolution. The Algerians need that in the same way as the South Africans need that. When the old man Kabila was still there, still alive, we talked to him and said to him, our view is, you are a Lumumbist. He was a part of the leadership under Patrice Lumumba, old man Laurent Kabila. We said that our own view is that the Lumumbists must come together. It's after they had removed Mobutu Sese Seko. The Lumumbists must come together because what happened with the assassination of Patrice Lumumba was a disruption of this national democratic revolution. We must go back to the national democratic revolution in the Congo to deal with the challenges of national liberation from Belgium and the establishment of a democratic state. The old man Kabila said we were wrong. And the reason we're wrong in saying that to him is because he said he's the only Lumumbist left. So there were no other Lumumbists to bring together. But that is what I think is the challenge that faces the continent as a whole. Is the realization of the national democratic revolution in all our countries. And so I'm saying you will find somebody in one of the Francophone countries who gives me a business card. On one side, it's got his name, the minister, and his address, contact numbers in his country, on this side. On this side, it's his name, minister, contact addresses in Paris. What does that signify? That's part of the national liberation. And you need this democratic part also. So you don't have these military people who want to come and govern and all of that. It's in that context that these other matters arise about national unity, national integration, African unity, integration, African Renaissance, and all of that. Ideologically, the framework is the National Democratic Revolution. And there's a great weakness with regard to that. You don't have, on the continent, there are very few parties of the National Democratic Revolution that sincerely, genuinely believe in that, and therefore will fight for the realization of this national democratic goals. And that is part of our problem here. Part of the negatives that come from the ANC is exactly this: failure to have close attachment to the goals of a national democratic revolution. When we talk to the US government, remember we are an NGO. But fortunately, some of them, even in the leadership of the US, will still listen to us. We say to them that the African continent has got a great wealth of policy positions about itself. As a continent, we've got the policy on democracy. We've got policy on the gender question. We've got a policy on children, on the economy, on peace and security, anything and everything. So the continent does not need to be educated by anybody at all about its own future. Yeah. So we say to the Americans, therefore, that if they want Africa to have a positive approach towards the United States, all the United States needs to do is to support Africa on each of these policy positions, whether it's about democracy or the economy or whatever, that the continent would indeed appreciate that support, so that you do not have a United States which comes to Africa to tell the African continent what to do, but to come to the continent in support of the positions that the African continent has taken. Now, I'm saying that we are an NGO, and that's what we say. I don't know what the government say when they talk to the United States. But that would be my advice to the government also. When you talk to them, tell them. They don't come here to instruct us about anything. They come to support what we as a continent have decided. Our colleague that raised a matter about state capture, that he asked somebody about state capture. I don't want to repeat what I was saying at great length. I'm talking about not theoretical things, about what's happening to this country, such that you have all of the negatives that you and I can see in the country. So I don't know about the definitions I say, for instance, you have a concrete example of an attempt to destroy the South African Revenue Service, which means you take away 85% of the revenues of the state. What happens? You can't pay civil servants, you can't pay soldiers, you can't pay supply clinics. The state collapses. Is it called state capture or what? I don't know. But what I know is counter-revolutionary. And that's what is critically important, is that we need to defeat this counter-revolution whose purpose has been to defeat the democratic revolution. Whether it's called state capture or not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that it is counter-revolution to defeat the democratic revolution. And that's the practical reality we're living with. And I think that becomes the practical task of all of us who are patriots, to say we can't allow this democratic thing which so many people died for, we can't allow it to perish because of these negatives that are brought by the counter-revolution. So we've got a combined task to make sure we defeat that counter-revolution. Why that's called state capture or not, I don't know. But what I know is that it's counter-revolution, which has to be defeated. Sure, the thing about kill the Boer, you know, this chant, this chant was, I think, made most popular by Peter Mokaba. It was there in the movement, but it was not a matter of great. You would hardly ever hear of it. It's Peter who likes this thing. And knowing very well, Peter, that there was no ANC policy to kill Boers. There was no ANC policy which was anti-white, and therefore let's kill the Boers. You could understand why Peter would say, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. Then. When I saw Julius the other day on TV saying this thing, I was asking myself why. Why is it necessary? Because it's got a historical context to it. There's a song which the ANC people sing at funerals. Hamba kahle mkhonto. It's got an end part to that song. Thina bantu bomkhonto sawabulala amapolo. We keep saying to the communists, but that had a context. You can't be singing it now. Thina bantu bomkhonto sawabulala. There's no Mkondo person who's going to kill any Boer. Yeah. But why do we sing it? So I'm saying I listened to Julius saying this, and I was saying to myself, why does he say it? Because the slogans have a context. The slogans which were people were shouting slogans in 1952. By 1962, they become irrelevant. But they are part of our history. So you are quite right. I mean, we have said this thing, the use of slogans like this, certainly in terms of African culture, it does not mean when Peter Mukaba says, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, that the people must leave the FNB stadium and go and hunt for farmers. It doesn't mean that at all. It's a mobilization thing. But I'm saying, even in that context, surely there's a context to it. If I started my speech here, when Tsapo said I must come and answer, and I came here and said, kill the poor, you would say, what's wrong with him? Because it's a chant, it's a chant. It's probably completely irrelevant to use it here. The part of what we've been arguing with regard to the Great Lakes, not the Great Lakes, to the Eastern Congo, is that there's a problem in the Congo which has not been resolved up to today. I'm talking about the DRC. We're back to that NDR I was talking about. As you know, part of the population in the Eastern Congo is Rwanda-speaking, the Banyamulenge. Part of the problem in the Congo is that from the days of Mobutu, they refused to recognize that the Banyamulenge are Congolese. They might be Rwanda speaking, but these are Congolese. And it's the responsibility of any government in Kinshasa to look after this section of the Congolese population like any other. But you remember what happened during the Mobutu years. Mobutu took the position that these are foreigners. It's like the South Africans here saying, I mean, they're Tswana-speaking people here in the Northwest. And suddenly the rest of the country says, those are not South Africans, they must go to Botswana. So what happened in the Congo case, that's how you had the Mai Mai emerge in the Eastern Congo. The Mai Mai were specifically targeting the Banyamulenge to drive them out of the Congo into Rwanda. But I'm saying it's a responsibility of the central government in the Congo to look after this population, which is Congolese. It's not Rwandan. It's Congolese. It's Rwandan speaking. That's the first problem. The second problem is that the administrative footprint of the government in Kinshasa does not reach the East. So you find a part is part of the country which has got a very light experience of being governed by the government in Kinshasa. The country is very big. So you have a weak government, weak imprint of the government on the East. It means other forces emerge and take over. You see the M23. You can't avoid the phenomenon of the M23 as the government of the Congo unless you say, we, the Congolese government, will protect the Banyamulenge because these are Congolese. If you don't say that, allowing other people to do as they wish towards the Banyamulenge, then M23 will continue to exist. Because they will get arms to defend themselves. So it's the same, is that problem in the Kivus of that weak imprint of the government, and then goes up to the Ituri and then those areas. We discussed that with President Joseph Kabila. It's your responsibility to look after these people in the East. You remember during the negotiations here at Sun City, you had 3 armed groups. You had the government armed group, you had Bamba's armed group, you had the third one, it's led by an advocate, which was basically representing the Banyamulenge. It was agreed, it was part of the negotiators, it's Congolese, and no problem. Even after the conclusion of the negotiations, there were discussions about how to integrate them properly into the government of the Congo and all of that. But that process collapsed somewhere. So I'm saying, my brother, what we need to do with regard to the Eastern Congo is President Tshisekedi should say to everybody, I'm president of the Congo, and I'm president of all of the people of the Congo, including the Banyamulenge. And then they need to do whatever they can, the government in Kinshasa, really to improve its capacity to govern the eastern part of the Congo. The other thing we then did, my brother, in that context, we brought together President Kabila and President Paul Kagame to say, you need to govern your relationship in a particular way. Because part of the problem, as you know, is that the people who had committed genocide in Rwanda ran over to the Eastern Congo. And so the people in Rwanda are saying, those ones you are accommodating there, they are the ones who want to kill us. They've killed us already, they want to kill us some more. So how do you govern this relationship? So we negotiated an agreement, or let me say they negotiated an agreement about how to interact with each other. Because you can't disentangle them, the Rwanda and the DRC. Agreed, and the thing was signed. I think it collapsed along the way. But you need that, you need those processes. As I was saying, the government of the Congo to take charge of the Eastern Congo, all of it. Then we need an agreement between the DRC, Uganda, and Rwanda in particular, to govern the relations among those three. I think that's what you need in order to resolve the problem in the Eastern Congo. And most certainly we'll be very happy to meet our sister people from the DRC. Let's discuss all of these things. The moonshot pact is a group of people who are opposed to the ANC. And I think they have every right to meet to oppose the ANC. As I listen to the declaration manifesto, whatever it's called, they can't say anything new. There wouldn't be anything new that would come out of there. But they have every right to oppose it and oppose the ANC. as I tried to listen, I listened to some of it and came across two new parties that I never heard of. Spectrum something, and another one. And then the Isanko. I was surprised to say Isanko there, because it's we don't have time to discuss the politics of Sanko. And I would never have thought Isanko was a party. But I mean, they come together because they're opposed to the ANC, and every right to do that. What they've said is nothing new. I come back to this matter I was raising. We are practically faced with a very serious challenge to rescue this country from forces that are determined to destroy it. What is it that we do in order to turn the economy around? We must do that. The economy must be turned around in order to produce jobs, in order to produce more wealth, so that we can attend to all of these deficiencies. But how do we turn the economy around? I don't know what Moonshot Pact said about that. But these are the things that we need to attend to. The question that was raised by our colleague there, what is it that we do in order to defeat crime? I thought the Moonshot Pact was not meeting to discuss those things. It was meeting to say, what do we do to defeat the ANC? What do we do to defeat hunger, unemployment, poverty, crime? These are the critical issues. And I would be glad if the Moonshot Pact would contribute to achieving those objectives. But the question of their political struggle with the ANC, I don't know. I'm quite sure the ANC is quite capable of defending itself. So it's not as though the fact of the pact and disagreements are matters that are of decisive importance in terms of the future of the country. They aren't. But in the end, colleagues, as we finish, I really want to leave you with this message: to reflect very seriously on the question, what went wrong from 2008? As the Institute of Race Relations say, what went wrong? And once we've identified that, what do we do to correct it? It's a very serious matter. I was saying to the Vice Chancellor here that it even includes the universities. There are some forces out there who are determined also to impact negatively on our universities. Who are these people? What do we do? I must say that in the end, I'm talking about the kind of people who will even kill in order to achieve their objectives. Thanks. Have a good evening.
A conversation is a monologue rather than a dialogue if there is no reciprocity. And I believe that the generosity that our Chancellor gave to us, but also to the colleagues next to him in sharing his podium and his platform, reflects that reciprocity in an exemplary fashion. So what I would like to do at this stage, as we near the end of our program, is to ask Professor Lebageng to give a word of thanks to close the proceedings. And I do know that Tsepo Nato also had an announcement to make following that. So the announcement will come after the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor and our Executive Dean have left the room. Is that in order? Professor Lebageng, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, mine is not to conclude, but to give a vote of thanks. And with that, I would request that we give an unreserved round of applause for both our program director and our moderator. A second one, please, so that they are separate. Another round. Thank you. I think both of them have conducted the proceedings expertly, and that's why, we are grateful. I would like to invite the order of gratitude and hope that you will find logic in my madness. I will start with the Executive Dean of the TM School, Prof. Velnkomo, to say thank you very much for always ensuring that the conversations with the President are very successful. And I would like to say to the Vice Chancellor that thank you very much for always gracing these conversations and giving your hectic schedule, and one wonders where you get the time. But I'll also want to add that it is not always very good. Recently, we met at Woodlands and we spent a lot of time, and I had forgotten that my wife was waiting for me. By the time I met with her, she was fuming and blazing like a nodule. And of course, lastly, I would like to, on behalf of the TM School and the organizers, to thank the Chancellor and former President for always availing himself for these conversations. I think over the years he has given his time generously and his wisdom that he has shared with the students and the broader audience. And I think he has done that, unselfishly. And for that, we must give him a round of applause. Still on being unselfish, I would be failing if I don't point out that the fact that this conversation with the President took place during the time of BRICS was coincidental. And all the detractors who have said this is seeking attention, I think that is one thing that has to be deflated, because that is not necessarily the point. Two issues are important here. One, this conversation has always been on the calendar of the school at the beginning of the year, and that is very important. The second issue is that the conversations are really meant for students. The fact that the audience has gone beyond students only speaks to the quality and the value of this conversation, and that is very important. So with that, we will continue to have these mind-teasing conversations with the president, maybe in future in different formats, but they will remain conversations nonetheless. In a country, a continent, and a world with multiple master narratives, it is important that we expand on the issues that we are discussing so that we optimize on the time that we spend with the president. And of course, I would like to lastly say thank you to all the students and other participants who have made this a success. And with that, although Mr. Neto will come, I'll say travel safely and reliable. Thank you very much.
Mine is simple. I'm going to ask all current students to remain in the hall as the rest of us go home. As Prof. Lebaken said, please do travel safely. Before you go, I'm going to ask President, Vice Chancellor, the Dean, to exit the room. But the rest of us remain for a short while as they exit. And then, as we exit, those of us who are current students, please do remain behind. We want to say one or two things to you. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
What's up?